Hey, this is Axe, and that's my BMW S1000rr, and I'm going to be installing that set of OHLINS suspension into that bike. I'm going to start getting the wheel lined up, get it close, make sure we're being careful around our brakes. This is the spacer, went in from this side. We have the axle, we want to grease that before we put it back in. Can prop it up. I'm just going to lift it, slide it through. Now start threading this spacer. It's easier for me anyway to start threading this onto the shaft. At least get it where we're solid. We want to push this all the way in that way. And we're going to tighten these bolts and pinch that still so that we can tighten the axle from the other side. And again, these pinch bolts, you want to turn each one just like a 1/6 of a turn individually. They're meant to be used together, and if you just do one first, it puts uneven strain on one of them. All right, that's all the way in, that's pinched. Now let's tighten the axle. All right, the axle is torqued in. Wheel runs nice and free. We always want to check that. Helps make sure we torque it right. And now I'm going to torque the pinch bolts on both sides. Got to get upside down to get this. I'm going to put the brakes back on. Put that thing on. Let's take that little cap off here. And that's where we want our sensor to go. I had to remove this from the actual sensor. Then remove this little plate from right there on the fork. Now I'm going to stick the sensor right in there. Let's see, I need the longer screw, that one, right in there. Okay. Let's make sure it clears. We want to look and make sure it looks like it clears, not by much, but it clears. These dowel pins have to come out before you can use this style caliper. And I remember doing that last time on the stock suspension when I installed the brakes. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to take one of the bolts and I'm going to put it inside. The reason I'm doing that is I'm going to use vice grips, and if I squeeze it, it'll break it or crunch it, and the bolt will provide something to support it on the inside. So all I got to do now is grab it and pull it out, and you just rock it back and forth, rotating it till it comes out. Just do that 3 more times. Now I'm going to grab my brake caliper, position that back on the wheel. There we go. It's right in place. I'm going to put the bottom bolt in first. The reason is that's holding that still. You gotta remember to put your bolt through that cable. And we'll get a wrench and tighten those. Just going to snug them for now. Do the other side. Now that everything's pretty tight, even though it's not final torqued, I'm going to take the stand out, get it back to the ground, and get the lower trees torqued properly once we push a little bit. And then we can go through and torque everything and put the rest of the parts on. All right, real gentle like. There we go. That pin out of the bottom here. And there we go. Now, these are tight, but I'm going to just push a little bit just to make sure everything's half where it wants to be. And now, I'll tighten the 2 pinch bolts on each side here. Alright, that's torqued right. Now, let's torque our brake calipers and our pinch bolts down here while we've got the torque wrench out. Now let's put the last piece of the forks in place. It's the fender mount. They look to be symmetrical. Just takes a couple little screws. I'm going to go ahead and use just a little bit of blue Loctite on the threads of the screws. They'll go in there. They're just tiny fasteners. I just want to make sure it doesn't vibrate loose over time. There, now the fender mounts are in place as well. And we can start putting back all the plastics everywhere. Radar detector mount bolted back in place. Wiring. So if you took anything else loose around here, make sure to put it back in place now and tighten it before you start putting the whole housing on. Good time to check your radiator fluid while you're at it and fill that up if it needs it. Now our fluid's at the max level, so we know where we are, and next time we want to check it, we can see if we've been losing any or not. Now we're going to put this bolt and this spacer back where they were on the brake tee. There we go, it's tight. Don't forget to go back and put in your wire ties where you need them, because you took them out before. Now we'll put this piece back on, just the two screws here that hold it up underneath. Alright, brake lines are in place, and so is that little piece. I think we're ready to start with the housing. Took some fighting, but I've got everything on the intake is lined up where it's going down levels. In other words, this outer surface comes up and then it goes down to the next surface, then down to the next surface, all the way around. It's necking down, which we need. Up on top, I can see the prongs from the headlight housing sticking through the two rubber bushings up here. See that bushing way down there? That's where you want to make sure you've got the shaft coming through from the headlight housing on both sides. Now you want to take these two bolts from each side and get them started there and there. And then as you start drawing those in, that'll help hold the whole housing still. You can kind of see, you just aim up the back side of it. You got some longer screws to help draw it in. All right, we have these two screws tightened down so that it's pulling the whole headlight housing inward. Same on the other side. Now we'll start the plastics. I put this one here first to hold all that kind of mess in place. And now I'll start with these two up here and then just kind of work around and inside. All right, I used these two bolts first and then lined those up, and I just have the ones on the inside with that wing over there. One up here, these two, and this one. Those two are tight. One right here is tight, and that one's tight. If your bike is stock, you may have another one down here holding this thing in place. This side's done now, outside and inside. Time to put the fender on. Fender's on. Everything lined up well on the fender mounts for the new forks. We want to reconnect that headlight connector right down there. Goes to that connector. And then the clip goes on that little ledge right there to support the cable. There, the connector in place. And you can see that little clamp, that S-clamp up there holding the cable where it needs to be. Gonna repeat that on the other side. Now's a good time to flip your lights on, just to make sure you've got connections at both of them. While you have the shield off, you might as well inspect things like these. This one's pretty torn up, so I'll take that out. That one looks like it already fell through. And most of these are okay. That one's a little weathered, and so is that one, so I'll probably replace those if I've got enough spares. The grommets are all replaced as needed. The 6 in this and those 2 in there. They've changed the styles, but obviously still work. And remember, when you're putting on the shield, the top 2 are on top and those 6 are underneath the carbon fiber. I start lightly doing the ones at the top because there's a lot of flex in there, less chance of breaking something, and then start working my way down here. And don't forget, the bottom ones have that thicker black washer because they're a little different. The rest are just the white washer. Once you've got all 8 fasteners in the shield, you just kind of work your way across, back and forth, tightening each one. Windscreen back on. Now we just have the mirrors left. The stock left, 8.904 pounds. Now that they're installed, we want to make sure that we know exactly where they are on day one, so in case something happens or we start messing with it, then we know where to go back to. Compression side, we go in 1, 14, 14, 13, 1, 0. That's on the left compression side. On the right rebound, we go in 1, 14, 15, and that's it. 14, 1, 0. Perfect. And when you get your new OHLINS, you may have one of these around there. It's just a circle bushing with a split in it and a green band around it. And all it is a telltale. It just, as your shocks compress when you're riding it, obviously you want to check your sag and adjust it and make sure that's accurate. But once you're set, most of us just use a zip tie around the fork and we just look and make sure, you know, that it's not bottoming out. That's what this is for, is it just shows you how far down your shocks are going. There we go. New shocks installed and the bike is all back together. It's new suspension. Make sure everything still runs. Now get out and ride. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to learn more about how to enjoy amazing machines like this.